When we talked about if it was Physical Health Week next week, people said, they'd be talking about exercising, eating the right foods, not smoking, so on, all the positive things that we'd been talking about. But when we said, what would they be talking about mental health? They said, you'd have psychiatrists here talking about medication and schizophrenia and psychoses and depression and anxiety and all that. In other words, when we said mental health, they heard mental illness.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds, and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Double D's Discovery Diaries podcast. In season 1, we shared our guest stories of courage and resilience, and we've still got that theme in season 2, but this season we're helping our listeners gain courage and resilience. And our first guest today, we're very excited to speak to him, is Rob Donovan, who's got a PhD in psychology, and he's adjunct professor in the School of Human Sciences at the University of Western Australia, adjunct professor at the School of Medical and Health Sciences at Edith Cowan University, and he's also the founder of the Act, Belong, Commit campaign, which began in Western Australia and is now becoming internationally known. And it's the Act, Belong, Commit campaign that we discuss and with Rob today. He has just had so many different academic papers, experience in all different countries. He's had his own marketing research company, Donovan Research, which was one of Australia's leading market research company. And he's just done a multitude of very varied things in his career, a lot of it to do with health promotion. He's been Deputy Chair of the Western Australian Ministerial Council on Suicide Prevention. He's also represented the Australian Government on the World Anti-Doping Agency's Education Committee, and he has written several books and over 300 journal articles and book chapters, as well as a similar number of technical reports for government and not-for-government organisations, mostly focused on health and social policies. So he is incredibly knowledgeable, and we're very honoured to have him here as our very first guest of season 2 of the Double D's podcast. So welcome to Rob. Rob, it's great to see you in person. Thank you for coming in.
Yep, you're welcome.
And the last time, Di, that I saw Rob in person was in the early 1990s. He was my lecturer and my honours supervisor at UWA, University of Western Australia. So it's a blast from the past, but very good to see you.
Long time ago now.
Yes, but I haven't forgotten it.
And Rob, we've just connected over the city of Stirling, or the Bridge of Allan, where the University of Stirling in Scotland is.
Yes.
So we realise we've got a little bit in common there, but it's great to have you here.
Yeah, Bridge of Allan is a great little town, actually.
Well, we've got a few Scottish listeners, actually, so they might be pricking up their ears as we speak.
So, Rob, when I did do my honours year with you as my supervisor, that was when health promotion was really only beginning in the early 1990s. But I know you did start your career in a more commercial sphere. But since then, you have really focused a lot on health, physical health, mental health. And did you want to talk just a little bit about that?
I guess so. Well, I started off, I did psychology and computer programming and various things there. And that was my entry into market research, because one of the local market research companies that I was introduced to help out with questionnaires and so on didn't actually have any computing equipment to do the analyses. And so I started doing data analyses and writing programs to do that. And then I guess people then approached me to do more of that sort of thing. So I decided to start a market research company. So I got that going about 1974. But prior to that, when I was finishing off my PhD, I went for a job at the Swan Brewery in the marketing department. And
did that involve testing, Rob?
well, some testing.
Yeah. I would imagine that would have been mandatory.
Well, I also took an anthropometric approach to things because I did anthropology. So I did believe that you had to actually get out on the street with people, mix with them while they were doing the sorts of things that you were encouraging them to do. And they were doing some things that you weren't encouraging them to do, of course. No, I guess, and so they're from the commercial side, and that was about the time that the health promotion started to emerge as a discipline, and that was because some people in the area realised that, well, we should be using advertising and other sorts of marketing techniques and to promote health. And so it seemed a natural sort of shift to say, well, okay, I'm doing research for all these commercial companies on how to develop advertising that is going to appeal to people to purchase their products. So it was one short step to say, well, how can we use the same techniques to persuade people to stop unhealthy behaviours and pick up healthy behaviours?
And so I get the sense that has become a real passion of yours, is the more the health promotion side and mental health and things. Would that be right?
Yes, I guess as time went on and Healthway started here and so on as well, so got involved there. And I guess it coincided, and it was a good coincidence, as that was when I guess was an exponential increase in use of these techniques by health departments and the non-government organisations like the Heart Foundation, Diabetes Association and so on. So they all began to realise that, well, yes, if we wanted the public to change their behaviour, we've got to reach them and tell them about the issue and then show them how they can change. And so I guess it became that I got less and less involved in the commercial research side because I was very busy with the health promotion side anyway.
And Rob, what would be one example of where you message something in a particular way that supports behaviour change?
You mean in terms of the
advertising or the promotion? Yeah.
Well, I guess there's a number of them, but one of the things we did try was a give it away for a day with cigarettes, so that as an ex-smoker myself at the time, I knew how difficult it was to actually go for a day without a cigarette. But that was always a good start for smokers if they could go one day. So we introduced the Give It Away for a Day campaign, and that got a lot of traction, and we had signs up at supermarkets and various shops and so on where you could sign a statement saying, I'm going to give it up for a day, because I knew the other research, which actually came out of an office environment where people would write up in a public statement about what they're going to do. And once you make something public, you feel a much greater obligation to do that than if you just said to yourself, I'm going to do that. But if you write it up somewhere and everybody else sees it, you're more likely to do it. So we had people sign pledges on the walls at supermarkets and places like that. And we actually had about, I think it was 30 or 40% of smokers did quit for the day, or tried to quit for the day, and about half of them succeeded. But the other thing we encouraged was people in the family and others to encourage them to quit for the day. And so we had about, I think it was over 50% of family members encouraged a person to quit for the day. So that was one sort of example, I guess, yeah.
Right.
I can relate to the declaring it publicly, because I wrote about this not long ago. I had to declutter my office in 2020 and I just could never get to do it. And then at the beginning of 2019, I announced to everyone in an email that I was going to be doing this, and I was going to be doing a newsletter, Donna's Decluttering Diary, every week. And everyone was expecting this newsletter every week, so I couldn't write a newsletter with it if I hadn't done any decluttering. Yeah. And I'd find all these historic photos and newspaper articles and things like that. But it was very, very strong to make the public declaration.
And I've heard the same technique being used in surgeries, like dental surgeries, where there's a lot of no-shows, or doctor's surgeries. If they actually hand the pen to the person and get them to write it on their card, the efficacy rate, goes up exponentially. So people are more likely to commit when they've written it themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and they used to use techniques like that too, of putting up a sign somewhere saying recycle. So then you would be more likely to recycle yourself then as well. So there are various things, variations on that theme.
So in particular today we're going to be talking about the Act, Belong, Commit campaign, so the ABC. And so very, very interested in how that came about. You told me the story a few weeks ago and I found it really, really interesting because it was very early days for this type of mental health campaign. So it'd be great if you could share that with us, Rob.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess around the 2000s, physical health promotion had been around for quite a while, and including even in third world countries, looking at disease prevention and so on. So physical health promotion was very well established. But we started to get far more reports from health departments about the costs of mental illness. But nobody had ever run a mental illness prevention campaign apart from a couple of sort of small studies that I'll talk about too. But nobody had ever done it on a systematic scale, and no government departments that we're aware of. So Healthway, which was then called the West Australian Health Promotion Foundation, came to us because we'd done a lot of the work for diabetes campaigns and smoking campaigns and physical activity and all that sort of thing. So they said, look, can we promote mental health in the same way as we've been promoting physical health? And at that stage I thought, well, I don't know, but we'll certainly find out. Because mental health was a far more complex area in a way, because when we talked about mental health in those days, we were actually talking about mental illness, which was quite the reverse of other things. And so I said, well, we'll do the research and find out what has been done and whether we can in fact do it. So at that stage, I mean, I had a psychology degree, but not clinical psychology. My sister was bipolar, and so I knew a lot about the illness side. But I thought, well, I'm not going to go anywhere near the actual textbooks and things like that. I'm going to go and talk to people first about what they think is mental health, mental illness, and see if we can change that or actually impact it in some way. So we did a lot of focus groups around the state with different ages and so on. And we used various techniques, like if it was Mental Health Week next week in Kalgoorlie, who would be there, what would they be talking about, and so on. And same way we'd introduce it with if it was Physical Health Week next week in Kalgoorlie. So the thing was, when we talked about if it was Physical Health Week next week, people said, they'd be talking about exercising, eating the right foods, not smoking, so on, all the positive things that we'd been talking about. But when we said, well, what would they be talking about mental health? They said, you'd have psychiatrists here talking about medication and schizophrenia and psychoses and depression and anxiety and all that. In other words, when we said mental health, they heard mental illness, which wasn't a big surprise, because over the years and right around the globe, to try and reduce the stigma around mental illness, we referred to those hospital wards as mental health wards, which is quite strange, because if you have a heart attack, you don't go to the healthy heart ward, you go to the cardiovascular disease ward. But if you have a psychotic episode, you went to the mental health ward. So it was no surprising that people, when they heard mental health, they thought mental illness. So that's when I said to people, well, imagine a mentally healthy person. What would they be like? And they said, they'd be sort of extroverted, capable, smiling, happy, in control, capable, all those sorts of things. So we also knew then that as far as we could in the campaign, we wouldn't talk about mental health, we would talk about keeping mentally healthy. So I got all the information from people about, what makes people mentally unhealthy and the sort of things, that happen to you, and what do you do then to keep mentally healthy, to enjoy yourself and so on. And so people talked all about things like keeping active. One person said, I get up, and she'd actually just lost her husband. She said, I get up in the morning, and I feel really down, depressed. I sit at the table and I think to myself, if I don't go out and do something, I'll go mad. So I walk down the street, I say hello to the neighbour, I go into the shop, have a chat to them and come back and it's all right. So people told us a lot of those sorts of things when we asked them about the positive side. So the sort of sum all that up, what was good at the end of doing that research with what people thought kept you mentally healthy. And, of course, they talked about doing good things for others. The old lady down the road, I take her to do the grocery shopping. The kid next door was failing every exam and his parents come over and begged me to help him with his maths. So I got the little bugger and, did some tutorials and so on. And he got through and it was so happy that, I could contribute like that and so on. And other people just talked about, well, having good friends. Good friends are good because you can talk over your problems with them. But they're also good if you get into a bit of trouble. And like the example I mentioned, if you know somebody who's a school teacher and your kids are having a problem, you can go to them for some advice. So friends were good, and that the old proverb, friends are good medicine, is obviously where that came from. So they talked about all those things and the commitment and volunteering and things. So we thought, well, yeah, we can actually do a campaign, and I went to look then at all the scientific literature. And what was quite incredible there were dozens and dozens of studies showing that the more people volunteered and the more people were physically, mentally and socially active, then the more mentally healthy they were, the more friendships and community group things that they were involved in, the higher mental well-being. So all the evidence was sitting there in the scientific literature, but nobody ever put it all together because nobody ever really asked the question, can we run a campaign like this? So that was all good news because I said initially I thought, well, even if we do find that you can do it, it could be pretty complicated because one thing I used to do early on was I'd walk through my office on new topics and just sort of say to somebody, oh, what do you think about mental health and what do you think about this and that?
Early focus groups.
Yeah. And people would say, oh, well, there'd be Jung and Freud and all this sort of thing. Like, oh, God, even if we do get one, it's going to be hard. But the good news was it wasn't hard because people already knew a lot of these things, but nobody ever validated it. And in fact, in my talks, I use things from around, well, one I've got is from outside a pub in London, and it says, reject isolation, join our congregation at the pub here.
Very good.
And also in the Gone Girl book, there's a point in there about a counselling type person. She says, well, what we need to do is find them something that they want to do. We've got to give them purpose and meaning in life, and that'll bring them back to a good state. And all these proverbs and Confucius and so on, if I walk along with two others from at least one, I will learn. So it had all been out there, proverbs, poems and country western.
The font of all truth.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I've got a whole list of country western songs. The loneliness in old people, well, you say hello in there. Joan Baez and Chris Christopherson and all these sort of people. So it's out there, and actually, so was it Glenn Campbell, his Kindness song. Have you heard that? And he puts it together actually with a whole lot of sayings from the Bible, from fables and various other sorts of things. And, we know that kindness is good for your mental health. So it was all out there, but nobody had actually brought it together. So we went back to Healthway and said, yes, it can be done. Here's all the research results and so on, and you could do this and this and this. But Healthway used to take the research, say, on obesity or physical activity or diet and that along to an NGO like Heart Foundation, Diabetes, Cancer Council, and then they would run a campaign with the ad agencies and things. But there was no equivalent in the mental health area. There were some NGOs, but they were very small and didn't know anything about that. And the Mental Health Commission also had no idea of how they might do anything like that. So after about 2 years, Healthway came back to us here at Curtin and said, well, you said it could be done. Can you do it? And I said, well, of course we can. So I got hold of Ray James then, who was very high up in community health and so on. And he'd also helped on a little bit of the preliminary research with talking to the health people about, because one of the other things we had to clear up is, well, would the mental health sector, how would they feel about a mass media campaign that was spending dollars on television ads? Because we thought at first some of them might sort of be very hostile to that, saying, no, we need more money for psychologists and treatment and so on. But in fact, they were all very positive because they said, well, that'd be great because that would take the pressure off. If we could keep people more mentally healthy, there'd be less demand on us. So he had helped out this. So I said he was appointed the general manager, and we decided to run a pilot in 6 country towns because it was a new thing. We thought, well, we've got to pilot it and for a sufficient period of time to really work it out. Because I knew too we had to have a community-oriented approach, that we had both the campaign to say to individuals, this is what you can do to keep mentally healthy, but also encourage organisations that offered mentally healthy activities to promote their activities, get people to join in and all those sorts of things. So we thought, well, this will take a couple of years to do. So we got funding for a 2-year pilot. And then we were sitting around saying, well, now we've got to have a slogan. What are we going to do? And I said, well, I want it to be the verbs, like in some of the health promotion campaigns were quit, and safety belts, it was the belt up campaign, the 2 fruit and 5 veg. So we wanted something that told you in the brand name what it was you wanted to do, not just some sort of brand name out there. So there was 3 of us, Jeffrey, Joel, Ray, James and myself, sat around and said, well, it's also a pretty complicated area, so when we get out there and talk about it, so I said, we've got to make it as simple as ABC. And as soon as I said that, up bubbled the research. A was, so what did we call A? Act. Well, because people talked about doing things, being active, physically, mentally, all those sort of things. Well, what would be B? And we said, well, that's belong, because even in the psychological literature, the belonging was a really big thing about good for mental health and resilience. And I said, well, what's going to be C? And that would be covered off by the things that people said were challenging, required commitment, gave you meaning and purpose in life. And so we tossed up a little bit about challenge versus commit. But I knew from my research in advertising that if you use soft letters, they were less recalled than if you use hard ones like k, t, d, like that. So challenge, I said, commit is what we want to have anyway. That's commitment, purpose. So we went with act, belong, commit was the campaign, because we could use that in the advertising, that it's as simple as ABC. We also knew that it could be an ABCs of mental health, which the Scandinavians actually adopted as their campaign name, and it summed up the 3 behaviours that we wanted people to do. And then we came out with in the second year of the pilot, and because we used ads, and I actually wrote a whole lot of ads about, and we reflected that people already knew these things, but we were validating it. So I had 4 press ads that went down the side of a newspaper. So one was act. Turned the page and it was belong, turned the page, commit, and then the purge. 4th one was now do something about it, sort of. But it was act. And we said, Grandma was a health expert. Use it or lose it, she used to say. She said, get out there, work in a garden, pick this, do that, read a book, something or other. Grandma did all that, and she lived to a ripe old age, etc. Now the health experts tell us that Grandma was actually right. But I guess Grandma knew it all along. And then we had Granddad was the great participator. Get out with your buddies and your mates, he said, and blah, 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 blah. And, Grandpa said that you could learn from these people and they could help you out and do this and do that. Now the health experts tell us that being a member of a club and having lots of friends is good for your mental health. Granddad knew it all along. And commit, we had Aunt Sally also knew a thing or two about health. It is better to give than receive, she said. And it goes on and says, well, when I was a kid, I thought it was the other way around, actually. But now that I'm an adult and I'm volunteering at a camp for kids that are troublesome and all the rest of it. It's hard work, but at the end of the day, I feel really good that I've contributed something. It seems like Aunt Sally was right. The health experts now tell us that blah, blah, blah. So we didn't go out to people saying that we're now going to, lecture you about what mental health is. We said, well, you already know what mental health is about. You just need to be reminded, validated and things like that. So that's why it was so easily accepted as a campaign. So we ran those sort of ads, and then we got a television commercial because we didn't have much money. And if you run a television ad, then it's quite expensive. But making it, because I thought then, well, because it was in the country, we'd have to have miners people, farming people, ordinary townsfolk, young, old, all these sorts of things. So I thought that's just too much. But then my son was in the advertising business and he said, well, let's do an animated one with the characters that are neither male, female, young, nor old or whatever. So we came up with a 30-second ad with these animated characters saying keep physically active, and he's playing tennis initially, then soccer later. Belong, keep up friendships and community events, and there's a band playing, and there's do something and help others. And it was a wheelchair basketball team and an umpire there waving them on. And the final bits were, keeping healthy, mentally healthy helps you cope better with problems and stress, and all these germs are attacking the animated character and he's bouncing them off. So, here's the number, call us up for some more information. So, and that was extremely popular and very well received, because the other thing is we could then use it after the pilot was over. We didn't have to make another ad. And we got it made cheaply through him up in Singapore. So we did all our own advertising and promotions and materials and developed self-help guides and so on.
So since those beginnings, so that was, I think it was in 2005 that started?
Yeah, 2005 we actually launched the pilot study. Yeah. So we were working from around 2003-04 to get the materials together and so on, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by the Speakers Institute Premier Boot Camp. So the Speakers Institute teaches and coaches people into how to speak in public. And in early December 2024, I attended a 3-day Premier Boot Camp myself, and it was a completely life-changing experience. I went along to learn how to share my story, part of my personal story, in a better way and in a way that I wouldn't become as emotional when I was telling it. And so I started off in a very bad way, very emotional, but with all the skills, the humour, the care and compassion of the coaches and of the other participants, by the end of day 3, I was able to deliver a 6-minute presentation on part 1 of my personal story. So I was very proud of that, and I found it a life-changing experience. So if you want to read a little bit more about my own experience in the Speakers Institute Premier Boot Camp, you can do that, and you can sign up as well if you're interested. It's a 3-day boot camp, and they have them throughout the year in various locations. So go to donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking. So that's donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking, and you can transform your public speaking like I did.
It seems really recent still. It's surprising to me that it's taken someone like yourself to realise, that actually it was all there. We knew this all along.
It was all there, and that's what surprised me too but I guess, apart from Healthway asking that question very specifically, in Victoria they ran a Together We Do Better campaign for a little while, but it was sort of the narrow focus was it's about people working together, and there'd been books on that. And in California they ran a campaign, Friends Are Good Medicine. So again, it was just on the friendships, but it wasn't elaborated out and clearly related to all your mental health. It was just on those things. So they were the only 2 things that we could find where people had done in public. But the one in California only lasted a year or 2, and Together We Do Better had a bit of media around it and some good pamphlets and press ads, but it never got underway. So, nobody had actually come up and said, well, let's do a whole mental health thing.
And it's this combination of the three that seems to be the key as well.
Yes.
So over the 20 years that this has been going, Rob, and it has grown significantly, if someone was just kind of listening and hearing Act, Belong, Commit for the first time, what are some of the learnings that from seeing everyone implement this over a couple of decades, what would you recommend people do, and what are some of the learnings that you've got from the 2 decades of the campaign?
Yeah, well, it comes down to some people who say, well, it's a good standby, though. You say, well, I'm feeling a bit depressed or whatever it might be. So what can I do to keep active? And then how can I increase my sense of belonging and so on, and giving more meaning and purpose in life? So I just say to some people is, well, go back and think about the things you used to enjoy doing as a kid maybe, or a hobby that you used to have when you were young or a teenager or whatever it might be, something that you enjoyed, and go back and start that again and see how it goes. And I also say things like you can do just acting, belonging or committing, and the example I think was using before is that you can act mentally by reading a book. That's good for you. You can actually join a book club, and then you get all the social effects as well. And then you can say, well, instead of just reading things like 50 Shades of Grey and other, non-fiction or fiction type stuff, pick books that are a bit more challenging. Say, get some books about the history of apartheid or something. And so then you're getting acting, belonging and committing all into one thing. Mm-hmm. So you can go for a run or a walk in the park or something by yourself, or you can join a running group or a walking group, and then you get all the sense of belonging and conversation going and friendships and that. Or then you can start saying, well, we're going to set a target to walk 50 or 100K this week, and we'll get our friends to donate $1 per kilometre, and we'll donate that to somebody.
When I was preparing for this podcast, I realised that that's why I like park runs so much, because you're doing something active, but you're with a group of people. It's very friendly, and then you start setting yourself these challenges because they're very good at keeping records and getting personal bests at each course and how many you do in a year and things like that. And you're encouraging other people to join in as well. So I thought that was a good Act, Belong, Commit example.
Yeah, well, there are other things. We also very early on had a cookbook, because there are things that we say to people, well, you can take up cooking and then you can join a cooking class, if you like, and then you can join a group that actually makes these foods and then takes them along to charities for the homeless or people with disabilities or something like that. So you can expand it out, and it often left to some people's own creativity to how they can expand the Act, Belong, Commit things that they do.
I was saying, Di, there's someone, and I was telling Rob that someone that I worked with who retired about 5-6 years ago, he heard the ad on TV at the exact same time that he'd been sitting there thinking, what the hell am I going to do when I retire? He based his entire retirement activities on this Act, Belong, Commit. And I've done a few little videos which we'll bring out shortly on this. So he joined a sporting group. He joined the committee to run the sporting group. He volunteered on the Bustleton Jetty.
Yep.
And he sort of, in his little video that we made, he said, look, it just improves your overall well-being so much. Yep. And it gets you out of the house. So that's a big tick to start with. Yep. So have you found a lot of other very positive stories like that over the decades?
Oh, lots, because when we first ran the ad and the other ads, it was really a matter of putting it on people's agenda, because basically nobody had ever talked about being mentally healthy and mental health promotion at that stage. So the first thing we wanted to do, the campaign objectives were to let people know that you did have some control over your mental health. In the same way as you have some control over your physical health. Not total control, we're not claiming that, but you can do things to keep yourself mentally healthy. So that was the first objective, that, you can. I'm not just get a mental illness or something. But what that first ad did, particularly the animated ad, was had all sorts of groups contacted us, because initially we thought, well, This is for the general public to just become aware that they could and should be doing something to keep mentally healthy. But we had all these groups contact us. We had like a knitting group, which was from Albany actually, and they used to knit warm cardigans and that for the homeless people for the cold winters down there. But they could see that, this is what we do. And it reinforced them, therefore, what they were doing. And because it did, they contacted us for more information about how they could do things. Dragon boat clubs contacted us, and right up to, I think it was one of the yacht clubs at that time thought, well, we need more volunteers. So we want to actually promote the volunteering, but in a yacht club, and then we'll do it for disadvantaged kids can come and learn a bit about yachting and so on. So people just started to get all ideas that they could continue what they're doing, but elaborated it as well. So
it's really reminding me, Rob, of the local area coordination model and how much social prescribing is around that. And what I used to work in that area in adult mental health many years ago back in Scotland, and one of the things that people would tell me is that, yes, I don't want to just come to a group. I want to be able to give back as well.
Yep.
So the shift in people, yes, getting out and about and doing things, but that human part of us that wants to be able to contribute and to give back is innate, or it must be innate, you tell me. But there's something that we know that that's good for us, that it's not something that's being done to me, and it's not something that is just about me.
Yep.
There's something that takes us to a different level when we know that we've done good for others.
Yeah, and that's what the Act Belong Commit was actually reinforcing, that sort of thing that, I'm actually, not just doing this for that. I'm actually getting my mental health strengthened. I'm doing good for these other people and so on. So it actually reinforced what they were doing, so they kept on doing it, as you say. But,
I also like on the website, and I explained this to someone the other day and they said, that's quite a good way of explaining it, which is what the website says. Act is do something. Belong is do something with someone else. And commit is do something you care about.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. That came about when I was testing some of the stuff with older people. And we developed 3 little brochures at the time. But ACT was do something, belong was do something with someone, and then commit could be do something for someone or do something meaningful as the broader thing. And it's interesting that what the Danes, because they were the first country overseas to take the campaign on a nationwide level, so Act, Belong, Commit didn't translate as an ABC in the Danish language, but they liked to do something with someone, do something meaningful. So they called it the ABC for mental sundhed, and then they had do something, which I won't say in Danish, but do something with someone, do something meaningful.
That brings up the point of how this campaign has grown. So it did start in Western Australia in 2005, but could you tell us a little bit about how it's grown? And I know that you're currently, there's a very large expansion underway.
Yep. There were a few jurisdictions over east because organisations heard about it and became partners in it, because it's all based on those partners with, sporting groups and educational groups and all sorts of groups joined in. So people over east heard about it, and so them joined up. I think the Tasmanian government ran it for a little while, but none of the other state governments picked it up on a statewide basis. Various schools did, like a very upmarket girls' school in Toorak, Victoria, picked it up. And they came up with a great idea, because our notion for schools was that there would be a committee made up of the kids. So they came up with a notion that should be the Act Belong Committee, which then got picked up by other groups and so on. So it was being picked up around there, and we had a little bit of interest from, I think, the Fiji or the Solomon Islands at one stage, university in the United States. But the Danes came to a conference here in Perth from the University in Copenhagen and so on, and the University of Southern Denmark. And they were really impressed with the campaign. So I went back, that was about 2014, I think it was, and convinced some people there, one of the big non-profit funders, to back it, and the university backed it. So they've been working on it there. And then Norway, a Norwegian person who came out here, but they were interested in social marketing, and I had that as a case study in my book on social marketing. So they got a little bit involved then, and then when they went back to Norway, talked to other people there about it. The Faroe Islands, which is a principality of Denmark, so they naturally picked it up and ran with it. Finland is doing a little bit of ACT on it now, and an organisation in Sweden is going. So, but the biggest thing now is an EU-funded project through an international sporting and culture organisation. It's picking it up to bring ACT Belong Commit into those community sporting and other sorts of things, particularly for people who have a disability or don't get out and about and mixing with the community and thing. So there's 15 European countries will be involved in that. And that's just kicked off. I just gave a talk to them by Zoom a little while back. Amazing. So that'll be moving around and hopefully go wider than that. So, it's I guess the thing is that it is so basic and simple. But at one stage, some people, health sort of professionals, if you like, psychiatrists and some psychologists thought it's too simple to be
I was going to ask that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not complex enough, so we can't do it. But others, of course, figured that, well, yeah, because we brought out a self-help guide, which was actually called A Great Way to Live Life, which was said by one of the people who approached us and became one of our testimonial ads. He said, yeah, ACT Belong Commit is a way I've lived my life. It's a great way to live life. So we called our self-help guide after that. That manual was there, and the good thing about the manual was a psychologist could use it to run through with a person, or they could use it by themselves. And so what we did at one stage was distribute them to the mental illness institutions so that patients, when they were discharged, could be handed one of those, and the nurse or the counsellor or psychiatrist could say, look, I'd like you to work through this book. And we followed up some of them and found that those who actually, the more they worked through the book when they left, the stronger was their recovery and quicker at the time.
Is that book still available, Rob?
I don't think it's as readily available as it was a few years ago.
Mm. Is there something on the website that would be similar?
I think it's electronic now because I was last very active. I'm still writing papers on it, and I'm working with the overseas partners and things, but I haven't involved with the local campaign for 5 or 6 years. And I think some things are changing there in terms of what's electronically available and what's downloadable and what's not.
We'll put some notes in the show notes about where people can get this information from.
Yep. Well, you can work through some aspects of the guide on the website by answering some questions and things. But it was a very good paper asset. Yeah.
And so, Rob, what's brought you the most joy in terms of the efficacy and the testimonials, and what is it that kind of really has brought you most joy from seeing the results of this?
Oh, well, there's been a lot of people have approached me saying that they've been impacted by the campaign. And I guess one of those was I was at a Suicide Prevention Awards, and I was asked to hand out an award in Perth, and so I was there, and at the end people having a little drink and things like that. And a person came up to me and said, I used to be in your MBA class at university and that. I said, oh, he said, yes. He said, but that's not why I come up to say hello now. He said, I'm a suicide survivor and I care for a suicide survivor, and we've been sitting at home moping around, looking at this and that and doing nothing. And she said, then I saw the ACT Belong Commit on TV and I thought, hey, I can do something. I've got an MBA and that I can go and volunteer for a non-profit organisation. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm back at work and so on. We had a young woman who won a photo voice competition that was ACT Belong Committed sponsored, and her mother had encouraged her to get into it and so on, and she'd entered and won the competition. And she'd approached us, and she also was in a testimonial ad, and she talks about how she was sick at one stage with anxiety and depression disorder and so on. But she went on to uni and was using photography to do this and to meet groups and do all sorts of things and so on. And she talks about how Akbalonkamit had changed her life. So I was up at Karratha some years later and giving a talk there on the campaign, and this young woman came up to me and she actually looked a bit like the person in our ad. And she said, and she was a photographer for the local newspaper. And she said, my mum said I have to come and thank you for the campaign. And I said, yeah, why? And she said, well, this ad was on one night and she dragged me in because my mum used to be a bit scared of waking up in the morning and wondering if I'd still be around and so on. And she said, look, come and look at this ad. She said, if she can do it, so can you. And she said, so I did. I went and took some lessons in photography and did this and did that. And now I'm a photographer for the local newspaper. So the feedback that I got was from being positive to being more positive. I was content, but now I'm really happy and I feel fulfilled and I'm dedicating my life to this and that. So others sort of saying, well, yeah, things are all right, but I just do enjoy it more. Now I've got more hobbies and I'm actually volunteering here and there and learning new songs on the piano and guitar and that. And then through to these ones that have come a big jump up from depression right through. So, so there's been a lot of feedback like that, which is good.
And it must be, I suppose it's the enacting of the ABC for you as well that you've contributed and in such a meaningful way because of the campaign.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, it's been an absolute joy to hear the story and to, I'm sure so many, I don't know anybody who isn't personally impacted or has members of their family and friends who are looking to stay mentally healthy or to help people to be more mentally healthy. So we're really grateful to hear the background to how it's all come about. It's absolutely fascinating and delighted that you've been with us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. And I guess we could also go back and thank all those people who took part in the original research back in 2000 and 2001.
Good old country West Australians.
And I think the three of us, but everyone else listening should be thinking, what am I going to do today after I listen to this podcast to Akbalonkamit?
Yes.
We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family.